Game four. Honestly, one of the strangest game in the World Championship, to be honest. Not much introduction, to be honest, with this one. We may as well dive in with the moves and ideas. So we had Ding with the white pieces, one knight f3. Nothing strange about this move. You could. This is a ready opening where it could transpose to, let's say, different openings. You could go. It could go to an English. So nothing wrong with this move order or the opening itself, knight f3. d5, good enough. And then we had e3. People were discussing e3 early on. You could transpose. You could play c4, and then we may have some kind of an English. English is coming, nothing to worry about. And we had, knight f6. And then the next move. We had b3. So much for the English. Does this one rings a bell for you guys? This kind of setup? Yes, it does ring a bell for me, at least. And I could tell you that Nakamura plays this over Blitz games online, even board games. I wouldn't seeing him play this in a classical format. He could, like a classical games. But I don't think if he's playing the candidates or any strong tournament, he would consider this being a main opening for him. Don't get me wrong, this is an opening you could play. Grandmasters and open format and open tournaments, it's fine to play. We are talking about a match, World Championship match, between two players that they try to surprise each other with ideas. You could try openings and with sidelines. So let's say, don't get me wrong, this game, between this game and game two, the difference is actually you play a major opening, which is Italian, and you play a sideline. That's fine. You could play a sideline in a major opening, but this one is not really a major opening that would be a troubling for black or anything in order to create some kind of a novelty. And I don't think this is really a good choice. I think this is not a really good choice. I mean, Dink spent 6 months to come up with this one. I mean, that's pretty questionable. We had b3 and then, bishop f5 and reverse London. And so much for this setup for white. One of the drawbacks for white is black could play a London here, and he is solid. I would say even very solid, as a matter of fact. So we had bishop e2. Maybe this is the only idea that makes sense throughout the game. So the idea behind bishop e2 is pretty simple. Should you play, let's say, e6 or something, then you may have knight h4, bishop e4, d3. You go back, and knight takes, and then you take back. You get the bishop pair early on. However, most players that played the reverse London anyways, they end up playing h6. And so h6 is a move. Bishop e2 is just simply developing the bishop, and then you probably castle. So we had this strange looking move, and it's hard to explain to students. I mean, it's hard to explain for myself too. Like, what is this move? What is going on, Ding? This one is strange. It comes. I mean, it's playable. There's games in the database. Believe it or not, in this one, when I first saw it, I was like, this has been played before. And yes, I saw that before. But however, this is, not something they play in the World Championship. There's a game between Wesley So and Anish Giri. Wesley was taking white. And you should see that game because majority of the majority of the database, there are games in this one, and most of the games it was in favor for black. Don't get me wrong, white won a few games, but most of the time black was actually better in terms of like activity, and Anish won this game. This may be the closest game that I think they were really matching the game throughout the today's game. They were matching the moves, so almost like they're following the Anish Giri game versus Wesley. So, but Anish won. So bishop e3, it's just like strange stuff, really. Like I could tell you what the idea behind it. It's nothing really creative here per se. I mean, so should you play e6? Is just bishop takes f8? But it's not. It's not a big problem per se. You still have to be precise with black, and I think the next move is pretty strong enough. I mean, something like this. And we had a castle. Somebody the other day told me, game one, Ding didn't castle. He castled later in the end of the game. And game 2, even though he castled, he ended up playing king f1, king f2. And game 3, he didn't castle at all, and or he could have castled like long castle, like in move 26. This is maybe the first game between both players that they are able to castle without any kind of trouble. I mean, it's a normal game right now, right, between the both players. And we need to have a normal game, to be honest. So this is the first time they castle, and everything is fine. So here we had e6. So now that's kind of interesting. So people could argue and say, could he just take in here and then black wasted the move? Not really. I mean, you could take, knight takes, knight back to d7. Black's still rock solid here. There's nothing wrong here with black. It's very hard to find ideas for white, to be honest. I mean, again, this choice of the opening, it just doesn't make sense. There's not much ideas that white could do to, to counter this solid plate from black. So they actually did. He did bishop takes, and I suppose knight takes happen, and then c4, and then actually they are following Wesley so game here and Nijgiri. So knight d7, and then I think here pretty strange sink by Ding. I think he was between a couple moves. I think people were looking at queen c1 as being a move that now it's the queen is acting like a bishop somehow. Queen c1, queen b2. I actually don't see the idea behind this move, except the queen is going to the queen side and play on the queen side. But I don't see like what does he achieve per se. Not much. I think he was between b4 also, but b4 doesn't achieve much. He might black could take and bishop takes c4. I don't see the ideas that b4 doesn't seem to add up very well. Queen c1. It was an alternative move. I don't see the idea. Ding took some time on this move, to be honest. A little bit surprising here, and then he ended up playing knight c3. A little bit surprised. And then here, and then we had, I think here, but though, maybe c6. I mean, you could argue and say this setup, could be played. Not much going on here for white. Not much ideas, but this is one way that Gukesh could have played. Going back, he castles. This is fine though. I don't see any kind of drawbacks here with whether he castle or you play c6. So we have take, and then we had b4. So the next move is gonna be. Let me explain after I think c6 happened. Yeah. So I think what white is trying to do is e4, some kind of like e4, e5, or e4, b5. So let's say he does e4, b5, takes, some kind of d4. You're weakening up c6. It's actually, simplistic idea. And I think black see it coming. It's not like there's no way you could counter these ideas. This here, white has a choice whether he plays e4 right now. There's also in the database is queen b3. There's also knight d4. I think the idea of queen b3 not so much a good move. I think the reason why queen b3 is not the greatest of the move. There's bishop g4, and let's say I'm giving white some moves here. Okay, so takes knight e5, and then some kind of bishop e2. You could play d4. And believe it or not, now black is getting active with the pieces. You could play centralized chess, and things are really, black might be active in this line. And that's the reason why he may not do queen b3. I think Ding, if I'm not mistaken here, he played knight d4. And that's the reason why you play knight d4, you don't allow bishop g4, right? So he knight d4, attacking the bishop. You're also gaining a tempo against attack on the f5. So bishop h7, and then he played queen b3. So this move order makes sense, right? It does make sense. So we have knight e5. So some people were wondering why knight e5, and you were really looking for f4. The reason I actually feel like f4 is not the greatest move, black was not going back. I could tell you that much. It might be his plan to go back. I think there's a reason to believe that the e4 square might be weak. Maybe, down the road as well. Could be used by black. And we discussed how pawn move is very, you have to take your time on the pawn because you cannot take it back. You cannot take back, take back the pawn. So you play f4, it's f4. You cannot take it back to f2. So I think my own opinion, f4, e4 has been played, but if you were to play here, knight g6. And I think what black was trying to do, whether he plays knight h4 or knight e7, he's going to go to knight f5. And this kind of idea is pretty interesting. And, you know, it's still equal. But, you know, maybe black could start getting active towards the center. And that's actually what I mean by playing towards the center here. So f4 was not played. I think e4 was played. And, you know, what Ding is going was this e5 idea pretty much. And then we had this move, and I think this move is pretty good. There's a reason why. Should he play e5, maybe b6, and there's maybe c5 push. And you might find yourself that you're going backwards, depending on the position at the time, right? And I think, you know, this has been played e5, and then the computer actually suggesting b5. I could tell you why the computer is suggesting this, perhaps. b5, you know, I think should you take, you know, this is pretty decent for black, and you have to really, you know, you have to kind of know that c5 might be coming in. This is maybe the reason why, I mean, this may lock the position a little bit. Maybe, you know, Gukesh didn't play because maybe this potential weakness on c6, you know, you could play rook c1. The computer feels like this is solid enough. However, he played b6. And I think people were talking about certain move here that white could have done that to keep up with the game a little bit more, try to be competitive. They were looking at bishop e6. I could tell you why bishop e6 is not played. There's a reason for that. The idea is here, and you have to play here. I mean, should you play here? You're looking at f4, and whether in the knight move here, you're looking at knight takes c6, right? Perhaps c6 would be a pawn that you could grab. However, he had to do rook c7, right? We have to defend on c6. The idea by white is to basically say f4. And should he play here, because actually black was threatening c5. So let's say here, here, here. Black was actually, the reason of rook c8 is actually to play c5 at some point. Let's say you go here, and then there's bishop d3. You just have an attack on the rook and the queen. And I think white has a line here to counter this kind of stuff. I believe this is possibly the good choice for white. Should you play here? Knight takes e7. Should you take the knight? You take here, takes here, takes there, and takes here, and then pawn takes. And I believe this is winning. Something like b7 and rook e8. The bishop is kind of like sitting on h7. There's a back rank issue there too. So this is winning. However, I don't think Gukesh is going to play any of this. He was trying to set up c5 in some lines when he played knight c4, right? So knight c4 was kind of like a move he could do depending on the situation, right? Just to play bishop d3 at some point. But not in this situation. I believe after f4, he just goes here. He's not going to play knight c4. Now, there are ways you could play. I think he could play queen e3. And here's the problem, though. And I think this is the reason why he didn't play it. Once you play queen e3, there's b5. And something like rook here, perhaps. And then there's this move. The bishop, I don't know, the bishop may not come out. And there must be a way you have to sack on b5. And it may actually be like the game might be drawn anyway, equalized. So if this actually the reason why Ding didn't really consider this possibility, you know, he considered the bishop is being almost trapped. You know, why should I play that? This is the reason why he didn't feel comfortable doing, and perhaps that makes sense why he played the alternative move from this one. He went was actually, let's see, bishop knight f3, I believe. Knight f3 was a move. Yeah, so this is actually pretty much, you know, trading down. Trading down everything as much as you can. So it takes, trading down, and then we have d4. As we discussed, the black at some point will play toward the center, and then we have, I think you have to play knight e2. And the idea is if you were to do this, the knight may jump on d4. And I think here, and then once there's a potential of the knight get active on d4, but the next move by Gukesh is pretty good actually. I think here he played bishop e4, kind of trading down pieces. So the next move is attack on the queen, queen e7. This is all fine. This is equal. There's not much going on, to be honest. Trading down, knight takes, pawn takes, knight c3. Pretty much trading everything down. Rook here, takes, not much going on. h3, c5, takes. So should white even win on c5? Let's say we're playing a rook ending where white actually somehow managed to win on c5 and they both have like rooks. This is hard to win, like 4 against 3. This is actually draw. Maybe with the queen, maybe. If you have the queen, just the queen and still have the pawn, then yes. And even here, should you trade everything and have the pawn and the queen, then it's like a pass pawn where it gives black something though. But this is very elementary stuff for those two GMs. Do you know how to draw that? It's very easy to make moves. By the way, you cannot offer a draw before move 40, and that's the reason why Gukesh is playing for more moves. I mean, he could have shuffled the pieces around and just offer a draw, but he wanted to play a couple moves, to get to move 40. If he found something, okay. If he doesn't find anything, he just, he takes the draw. So queen c2. By the way, there's a little bit of a trick here. Let me explain here. You don't want to play queen c3. You might argue queen c3, try to win something here. This is a bad move. There's a reason why, because you check. And the problem is the king can go here. You just have to lose your queen. This is elementary stuff, elementary tactics. Both players are going to see it, of course. So queen c2, and I think the same thing here. You just play here. So Ding wasn't really going to take the pawn. So rook d5 anyway, and then the g3, f4, f5. It could be like a problem should we have more pieces on the board, because this weakened up some diagonal. Was it really necessary? It may not matter. This is a queen and rook ending, so it may not matter much. King g2. By the way, Gukesh could have traded queens. This could also happen. This is pretty draw. Not much you could do. So king h7, queen c4, queen d6, e4 here, and takes, queen e4. You don't want to play here. This is the only way you could win for white, g4, and this would lose the rook. You don't want to do that. So obviously here, I think we had here trade of queens. Pretty easy ending, pretty easy draw. King g6 can go over, rook d4 check. This is like a repetition, I believe. They actually they were over 40 moves, and you could actually draw before 40 moves if you have like 3 draw repetitions. So there's a repetition here 3 times. So it's a draw. Very boring stuff, to be honest. Not much to add into this game. It could be a missed opportunity. Should Ding lose the next game, then we would be talking about that game being super boring. And we could have played like a mainline opening. You could play like an English, try, or maybe d4 or Catalan if you give in the chance, and things would be a lot different, right? At least even if he draws in the major opening, at least he tries. You could try some ideas, but it's super boring at this point. Gukesh is gonna take white next game, and so far at this point, Gukesh is the one that keeps creating some ideas, and he's playing the major openings. So we'll see. I think the next game, my prediction was Gukesh being white. He's gonna play e4. I don't think he's gonna play d4. E4 maybe, and then we may see some kind of Italian or maybe even Rolopaz. We'll see. And it should be fun. The only good thing about this game, though, that seems to be positive is the time management, but it was easy to make moves. Time management is key. Should the both players play the future games, and do you play a little bit faster? Do you just leave time for critical positions? That'll be great. We'll have to see this for the next games, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. We'll stay tuned for more games review. Take care.